Barbara's time. Let me spotlight her, and we're going to let Ms. Williams begin for us. There you go. And I'm going to mute my microphone also.
Okay. My husband would say, he's not sure about being an expert, but he would say she is dogged about Aldridge, mainly because I didn't know who he was. And by sheer chance, I found out that he was an actor, that he never came back to the States after he went to Europe. And they're not even sure how he got to Europe. But my story with Aldridge begins in 2008. I think I was 67. My husband had decided that Poland sounded like a neat place to visit for vacation. So I said, fine, and proceeded to see what I could do for the things I like to do when we go on vacation. So on this particular day, the weather was bad. I couldn't walk the dog at 6 in the morning, so I went to a 6:30 aerobics class. And a woman who was exiting, a woman I'd seen before, walked out with me and said, hello. I said, hello. And then I said, from where is your accent? And she said, Poland. To which I said, oh, we're going to Poland in a few months. She said, come to my house. And so in a few days or so, I went to her house and left with 10 books, not guidebooks, but history books of Poland. And on one page, it said, you know how you scribble on the right-hand side of a column when you were in school? In that open space, it said, African-American Shakespearean tragedian, first time I'd really pronounced that word, Ira Frederick Aldridge is buried in the Evangelical Cemetery in Łódź, Poland. And I almost fell off the chair, because if this were the same Ira Aldridge whose theater I had walked past for 3 years on Howard University's campus, I was shocked. So let me fast forward just a bit. I live in Memphis, and St. Jude is here. And that's why that Polish woman was here, because her son had contracted cancer when she was visiting a sister in Washington. But here, there's a very wonderful women's foundation. And one of their guests one year was a Howard alum and a theater graduate who has made a name for herself very successfully. Not the one you're thinking, but an older one. So I called them and said, can I speak to the guests for a hot minute? I just have one question. And she told me when to show up, and I did. And I said, excuse me, I'm a Howard alum. Don't worry about my name. The lady on the other side knows me. Can you tell me where Ira Aldridge is buried? And she thought and said, no, where is he buried? I said, Poland. And then she turned to me and said, what's he doing there? And then I knew, if a Howard grad who has seen the Ira Aldridge Theater for 4 years didn't know where Ira Aldridge was buried, we had a problem. So between 2008 and 2012, when I met someone in Poland, I researched, was there anything named for him in the United States or any place else? And yes, indeed, there were. And so I began to compile a list of things. And those are the things I'm going to share with you today, because the accolades he received as an actor for 42 years, he never came back to the States, is amazing. And that had to transfer to somebody in the United States, and indeed it did. So do you want to ask a question before I start my list or anything else?
Anybody? You are a co-host, Barbara, so you should be able to screen share.
Yeah, I will. Anybody have anything to say?
I think you should just go ahead.
Okay. All right. Let me tell you one thing, and then I'll go to the second part. Um, I tried to find, what I could. There's an elementary school in Chicago named Ira Aldridge Elementary School, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the places I went was I saw someone who had received the Asala Award one year. So I called the Sala. I wasn't a member in those days. And I said, can you tell me when you started this award, the Ira Aldridge Award? And they couldn't. I was amazed. I almost didn't join the group, but I did. But at any rate, Asala has an Ira Aldridge Award, or had one. I haven't seen it listed in a while. So let me tell you, Ira Aldridge was born in 1807, New York City. His father was a straw seller and also a minister on the weekends. And he wanted his son, and he had two, to go into the ministry. But the kids had found the theater, and Ira Aldridge in New York City would possibly have one theater where he could either perform or sit in the audience, and there were two, probably just one, where he could only sit high up in the audience. So the one that you probably know is the African Grove Theater. And my title is Aldridge Still Lives, which means he died in 1867, but there are things going on for him, about him, 200 years later, or approximately 200 years later. And one of them is that African Grove Theater. So it's in Lower Manhattan, and New York City, New York University bought the building, where that theater used to be in the 1820s. And so they hold concerts. I just got something from NYU the other day, and they're holding a piano concert in the African Grove Theater. So it's not Aldridge's theater, but it's where he found theater for himself. So he went to school. Fortunately, the he was old enough to experience the African schools that were there, the free African schools. And there were 8 of them before they were absorbed into the New York City system. But he did learn a lot. They had preparatory classes for job skills, shoemaking, and also sailing, because New York had a port. And they also had great elocution lessons. And one of his classmates remembers that he did well, always did well in elocution lessons. So, excuse me. So at some point, he decided that he needed to go someplace else, because the theater, the African Grove Theater, had been closed because the competition was ready to beat them up and close the theater in that fashion, by a fire if necessary. And Ira Aldridge himself had been beaten up and decided, I can't do anything like this in the United States, or in New York City in particular. And so he somehow got himself to England. He knew a couple of English actors who were performing in New York City. It's possible he was attached to them in some way. I don't know, and I haven't read anything, excuse me, for the major biographers who can tell you how exactly he got passage, but he made that 3 to 4 week journey on the sea and ended up in London, where he did at age 17. Think of yourself at 17. And he made it there at age 17, never to return. So he, excuse me, he did 2 things. He got a job acting, and he also married at age 17 to a woman who was 10 years his senior. But the marriage lasted 30 some years until her death. I think it was 39 years. So he began to perform. He was badly panned in the major cities in England, especially in London. And the other thing was, and there are two things that amazed me when they start talking about this period of time of theater in England. Number one, there were only two legitimate theaters, and they were called patent or patented theaters. And there were only two in London. And fortunately, he was able to end up at what became later the Old Vic Theater. But they also had many multitudes of theaters who relied on animal acts or vaudeville kinds of things, minstrel kinds of things. And those critics looked at him and said, well, he's Black. There's no way he should be where he's performing. And therefore, they began to critique him on the basis of he's not supposed to be able to speak well. He's definitely not supposed to be able to express any feeling about Shakespeare. Why is he there? Why did they permit him to be there? So he, as I said, was panned badly. And then the two of them, he and his wife, decided to go to some of the provinces. And he did very well in the provinces, but it took him 30 some years, almost 30 some years, to make a name for himself that he was comfortable. He was so comfortable and good that sometimes he would offer a freebie. If a church or a school wanted to raise money, he would offer them his services to do performances for a weekend or just a night, and they would split the take, or he would just give it all to them if they wanted to. Do you guys know a gentleman? Let me ask you this. Have you been to the Folger Library in DC? No, I can't see. All right. There are a couple of videos or audio tapes by Bernd Lindfors, who is the major English uh, biographer of Aldridge. And he says he was the best thing since sliced bread when it came to some performing in some of these towns. So it means he was performing in England. It means he was performing in Scotland, in Wales, and in Ireland for about almost 30 some years. And the other thing I wanted to tell you about that time of theater in the theater there is the fact that you did not see one play all the way through. You might see act two of XYZ play, maybe scene two, and then after an intermission, you would also see I am so sorry. You would also see another play, and you might see Act Three, Scene One in that play, which meant that your brain had to be always working as to where you were, what was the context of the play, et cetera, et cetera. So he did become a very, very fine interpreter, as they said, of Shakespeare in particular. But he also did not just Othello, which is what people say, but he also did a lot with King Lear, with the Jewish character, and I can't remember the name of the play offhand. But any character in a Shakespeare play he was able to do. Sometimes he would white up so that you would know he was the white character, but he would leave his hands brown, or he would also color his hands and white them up as well. But he became well known, and in 1852, he decided to go to the continent. And that's where his stuff really hit the fan, so to speak. He was marvelous. So let me tell you what happened when he left the US, starting in 1827. He left in 1825 and never came back. So in 1827, he gets his first accolade. And since you're all on mute, I won't ask you if you think you know where the first country might be, but I will tell you it is from Haiti. Okay? Think about where Haiti was, and depending upon who had won or who was writing the story of the Haitian Revolution, you were either the winner or the loser. But in 1827, the Haitians had said they ended the war in 1801. But by 1804, for sure it had. And then France said in 1825, yes, you finally won the war. So they gave him, as the first man of color in the theater, they gave him an honorary commission, captain in the Republican Army of Haiti, talked about which regiment it was, etc. And it was from the president, John Pierre Boyer, who was president from 1818 to 1843. But this is his first accolade after only 2 years of being in the circuit. Let me show you the thing that tells you that he still lives. Not the thing, but the picture. Let me see where it is. Okay, I'm going to show you this. Okay, can you, oh, I'm not sharing yet. Oh, geez. Wait a minute. Hang on. My apologies. Okay, there it is. Okay. All right, do you see these two people?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, speaker. All right. This says that, I think I need to get it. Oh, I knew it. Wait a minute. Okay. This says that this gentleman, who is now the ambassador to England, this is 1955, he's presenting a bouquet of gladioli to Miss Amanda Ira Aldridge. She's the last child of Ira Aldridge. Again, this is 1955. It's to commemorate Haiti's honoring her late father 128 years ago, 1827. And when I saw this, it was like, you can't make this up, you know. So this is, as I said, his last child. She's going to die at age 89, and not too long after this picture is taken. But they're remembering the fact that they gave this Chevalier commission to her father in 1827. And then there are a number of paintings for him, on him, as time went on. In 1830, there is the one that hangs in the National Portrait Gallery in Washington. It's by an English painter who's known as a society painter. And it's a beautiful one. I was back there last year, and let's see. Okay. Can you see this one?
No.
Oh, I didn't share.
Yeah, I would just, when it's shared, I would just leave it up and you can go through your slides. We don't have to go back and forth. That's perfect.
Okay, but you can't see it.
Not yet.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, they're up, but I just forgot. Okay, hang on. Okay. All right, we're there.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you all. All right. This has been moved to a gallery now. It was sitting in the hall a few years ago, but they've moved him. And so you have this long, long view of him. And I need to come out and do something because you can't see that. Okay. All right. Here I am. There's a girlfriend over here. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why you don't see it, but this is he, and this is painted only 5 years after he gets to England. I asked an art historian, why is it that when you look at pictures of Aldridge over the years, even during the same period of time, they're all different? And she said sometimes they never seen I was going to say their victim, their sitter, but they paint them the way they think they are and they claim them. and therefore they become Aldridge, and they are classified as he was sitting there. Sometimes they did have him in actuality. In this particular case, there's a good chance that he was seen by this particular artist. So let's see. Okay. Then continuing in Europe, as I said, he has been in Europe for almost 30, excuse me, not in Europe, in England and the British Isles for almost 30 years. And in 1852, he starts on his first continental tour. And he's really doing a lot of the real heavy hitting of the real Shakespeare characters. So in 1853, he receives a membership in the Prussian Academy of Arts and Sciences. In 1854, he begins the first of several tours of Poland. And when he dies in Poland in 1867, he's on his seventh tour. And sometimes he repeats the same cities that he has before, or he just goes to new cities. It depends upon who wants him, what theater has asked him to come. But he begins the first of 7 tours in Polish theaters. In 1854, he receives the Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria, cross. And then in Switzerland in 1854, he receives the White Cross of Switzerland. And a lot of times they had to carry these awards with them. They couldn't go home, and put them in the safety deposit box of the bank. And so you were always carrying your wealth around with you to a certain extent. In 1856, he becomes a member of Our Lady of the Manger in Budapest, Hungary. And in 1858, he is knighted by His Highness Duke Bernard, reigning sovereign of Saxe-Meiningen, and who was the brother of the late Queen Adelaide of England. And then in 1858, he is in St. Petersburg, and he's performing. Leon Tolstoy has gone to the theater, and he takes a friend. Has anyone heard of Taras Shevchenko from Ukraine? Okay, I hope they were all no's. All right. Taras Shevchenko in Ukrainian history is like putting George Washington, Lincoln, and Amanda Gorman in one person. He was similar to the history of Aldridge in that they both lost their mother at a very young age. Shevchenko was born a few years after, and he died a couple of years before Aldridge, but they were pretty much within the same range and at the same period of time in their lives, in their 40s and 50s. And Shevchenko was born a serf. And not until he was almost 20, I believe, that he was bought, because he had artistic talent, which fortunately his Russian owner had seen, and therefore allowed him to go to school for art. But not until he was about 20 was he a free person. And in comparison, Aldridge was not enslaved, nor had his father been or mother, but there was always that possibility because slavery was still legal when he left New York, but it was going to end completely in 1827. So they meet. I won't say they fall in love, but they have the best relationship considering that they can't speak each other's language. And one of the daughters of Tolstoy is the main translator between the two of them. But they compare notes and they do become good friends. In one particular case, in 1859, Ira Aldridge is seen by Tsar Nicholas after he's had a performance, and he pins a beautiful gold medal on Aldridge. The students of the University of Moscow have marched to the door of the rear of the theater so that they could greet their idol when he comes out. And as he emerged, they seized him and bore him on his shoulders to his carriage. And they unhitched the horses and they drew the carriage in triumph to his hotel. Now, I had met by this time a woman who is an Aldridge fan. She translates from Russian and from Ukrainian into English, and she looks at the old things that are still in Russia and in Ukraine. And I said, "Allah, can they do that? I mean, did they actually, these kids, take the harness off the horses and put themselves in harness and drive him to his theater?" And she said, "Yeah, it's not unbelievable, not at all. It's very possible that they would have done that at that particular time." So at this point, he is at the top of his game, and he has spent a number of years there in Europe, never to return. 3/4 of his life is spent in Europe, and he dies in we didn't pronounce the word. Do you know how to pronounce Lodz in Polish? All right. Thank you for shaking your head. I see a few heads. All right, I had a whole little English Polish lesson for you, but I won't make you suffer under those circumstances. But at any rate, Lodz is pronounced Wooge, Wooge in Polish. And as I said, he was making his 7th tour in Poland and had gone to this particular town to perform. And the good thing about this particular place is that the proprietor had built the hotel and the theater, and he put them in combination. So Aldridge did rehearse during that time, but he died before he had his first performance. And people, well, I think one friend said that the procession in 2 days was 8 hours long, because everyone wanted to get into the procession. It was a working man's town. It was a textile town, and they just felt like he was one of them because there were so many others in that town. This was a period of time when Poland was owned by Russia, Prussia, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Poland did not exist as a country for 123 years until the end of World War I. And they were given back much of their country because the people who had owned it, so to speak, who had built the word I want to say, who had taken over the country, lost the war. And so the spoils went to the victors and Poland became Poland again. So that tells you that from Europe, he was well liked, well liked. And I want to tell you now what some of the things were that I found in the United States that were named for him. And let me go to those. For example, and I'll just run down the date and the city. In 1883, the Ira Aldridge Dramatic Association Club or Company, we're not sure which, opened in Washington, D.C. We're not sure how long it lasted. It probably was a matter of months, but they named it the Ira Aldridge. 1885, the same thing happens to Philadelphia. Again, we don't know how long it lasted, but it was the Aldridge Dramatic Club. In 1889, it opened the Aldridge Dramatic Association, in New Haven, Connecticut. All right. And then in 1919, the Aldridge, yeah, that's the full name. And there's a picture of it with lights, those big Klieg lights that you would see on the exterior of a nightclub or something like that. The Aldridge in Oklahoma opened. And at one time, I believe there were 3 black theaters or 3 theaters promoting black plays in Oklahoma City. In 1924, the Aldridge Players were created in Corona, Long Island. And then in 1927 to 1935, the Aldridge Players were created by Frederick D. O'Neill. Do you all remember the actor and the president of the guild? You guys are not theater people? Okay, I'm not either, but I learned as I went along. At any rate, um, Frederick O'Neill became an actor in the 40s in the United States, in New York City, and became very famous. And then he became president of one of the guilds, the Actors Guilds, and there was the Equity Guilds, which was most unheard of in those days for a Black man to have that. So that was 1927 to 1935 in St. Louis, Missouri. And in 1964, between 64 and 68, Berkeley, the University of Cal, Berkeley, had a drama instructor by the name of Henrietta Gwendolyn Harris. And she formed the Ira Aldridge Players West. And it was the only one that was that far west. She died in March of 2017, and at the age of 100. Excuse me. I haven't taught this long in a long time. The thing with her was she wanted to do Shakespeare, and she took these young people who were her students at Berkeley and put them on the road, so to speak, and took them to some of the colleges in the South. One of her youngest players was Marguerite Ray. And if you ever saw The Young and the Restless, Marguerite Ray had the only Black character on there. She had a position on that film, in that show, for 10 years. And then wait a second, sorry. She was also the girlfriend in Samson and Son. So I was able to get a phone number for Marguerite Ray, and I called her because Christina, who's my partner in all this, and I were going to do something that year. And I said, "Do you want to go to Poland?" She said, "I have a dental appointment on that day. Otherwise, I'd be happy to go." So she recently passed, but I did get to speak to her. She was 89, so she did well. But that was the furthest west that I have found any particular thing named for Aldridge, and it lasted for just those 14 years, those 4 years. But I wish I had thought about it, because Henrietta Gwendolyn Harris was still alive when I started looking at this, and she would have passed maybe 2 years after I knew of her. But I looked at the dates and I said, she's probably not there. And Berkeley has already done interviews which have been transcribed for many of the Black first professors at Berkeley. And so I got what I wanted, but I could have talked to her, and she would have appreciated it, I'm sure. In 1982 to 1992, anybody know anything about the Inner City Cultural Center in Los Angeles? Well, it was one of those community acting groups, and there was an Ira Aldridge acting competition funded by an actor. And I think you would know this actor, since you are fairly young compared. Let's see where he is. And my apologies. Okay, he should be right here. All right, what do you see? Do I need to, yeah, I need to share. There he is. Okay. Do you recognize any of these people? And they're shooting. Huh?
It's the Love Boat.
That's right. And do you see 4 or 6 people?
4.
4, okay. Tell me what I didn't do right, because for some reason, there we go. Okay. Now you've got 6.
5.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Well, for the moment, that's 5. We'll do with that. So that's your main cast. Do you know where they are? This is about 8, 9 years ago. Okay, you don't. They're getting their star in Hollywood. And so this is the gentleman. His name is Ted Lange. This is the guy who knew Marguerite Ray and gave me the phone number. And by association, he knew of the other young lady, Harriet Gwendolyn Harris. So I'm trying to segue here. Let me see what I want to do. Okay. I mentioned Christina Kujawinska Courtney, who is now retired, but she was born in Rouge and raised, educated, taught, retired recently, and is one of the premier people on Shakespeare, and as well as Ira Aldridge. And she has spoken from Ukraine to India to Japan on Aldridge and on Shakespeare. So there was a woman whom I knew from Morgan State, and she told Ted, because he is a Shakespeare scholar. That's how he knew Henrietta. And he actually went to, what's the name of the school? I'm asking now, I know the answer. What's the name of the school in England if you're going to the acting school, the premier acting school in London? And you don't have to be a theater person to know, it's just something that's out there. Okay, am I seeing a hand or? Yeah,
Is it the Royal Academy, Shakespearean
That's it.
Academy?
that's it. That's it. He did not go through the whole 4 years, but they had special summer programs for people who were English speaking and wanted to know more about Shakespeare. So he completed that. If any of you know the wait, it's my husband doing the vacuuming. Hang on. Fred? That you never imagined that would happen. At any rate, Lonnie Elder, the third playwright, was a Shakespeare aficionado, so to speak. And there's also an actor, and I think he's still alive, but he's a young man, who did The Rock on television. Does that ring a bell with anybody? He is also a Shakespeare person. That was his thing. And his well, let me leave it at that. At any rate, this young lady called Ted and she said, Ted, there are people going to Rouge to see the tomb of Ira Aldridge, and they're having a one-day symposium. Would you want to go? So Ted calls me, because that was the number she gave me. So let me go back just a bit. Once I found out who Ira Aldridge was, and I found out all of these things were named for him, and I didn't tell you the list of individual places like the school, I was just amazed. And I kept thinking, if all of this happened, why isn't anything known for him? So let me go
Barbara,
back.
we have a suggestion. Oh, did you see that? There was a suggestion in the chat that you push play on the slideshow. Thank you, Jean.
Do I need a reminder? Thank you, Mr. or Miss Suggestion. I appreciate it. Believe me, and I'm going to push play. Yay! Wait, did I push? Am I sharing? I'm not, am I?
You are.
Okay, do you see, oh, wait, do you see a bunch of people with a pink thing in
Yes,
front?
big
Okay.
group photo.
Okay, thank you. All right. This is a one-day symposium, and these are the people who were in it. This is Christina Kujawinska Courtney, and I met her in 2012. We had corresponded for a couple of years, but I knew of her before because I had found a picture of the grave on Find a Grave, of Aldridge's grave. And I emailed the young man who had posted the grave and I said, can you tell me anything? And he said, there is this woman who's written a whole biography on Aldridge. It's in Polish, in case you don't read Polish. He said, but she wants it in Polish to stay that way because she wants to make sure Polish people read this. And so I met her in 2012. We were on our way back home from St. Petersburg. So we've done two things together, and I can show you those things. One of them is what Harriet said, make sure you show them the plaque with your name on it. But this is 2017, and here is Ted. He did come and he did present, and he talked about what he had done at the Inner City Cultural Center and some other things that he had done going back with his life with Shakespeare. This gentleman is the U.S. Embassy Cultural Affairs person. I knew people in the embassy in Warsaw because they had written a letter for me on something else I was doing for Aldridge back in 2014. And so when I knew this was going to go on and had a date, I called and I said, send somebody, I don't care, but let's just have somebody from the US Embassy show up, which is about a 2-hour drive from Warsaw to the west and a little bit to the south. This is Tony Howard. He is now Professor Emeritus from the University of Warwick. But he did 3 things this same year. This is in November, and in August, and if I have time, I'll show it to you. He put up a plaque because when Aldridge was performing in Coventry at age 20, he had such an effect on the town, small town, and the audiences that they let him be the manager of the theater. It was a short season, about 4 months or so. And he became the first non-white manager of a theater anywhere in the British Isles. And they thought so much of him and got to know so much of him as a human being versus the African kind of thing that they did write Parliament and say you should end slavery in this country now. And it didn't happen until I think I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember. I want to say 1833 all over as far as England was concerned, but that may be a little late. My apologies. So this gentleman wrote a play on Aldridge, and he titled it For Your Freedom and Ours. When Poland was disbanded as a country, you had to do something with the military, and very often they would join the military of another country which was fighting the same enemy as Poland, which in this case would have been Russia, Prussia, and the Austrians. So that's why he titled it For Your Freedom and Ours. This is his wife, who's also a theater instructor. This is his lighting instructor, his lighting director for his theater he's a junior college person, now retired. This was her sister, so it was a freebie for her. And I think this was his lighting person. And so they all came and they did not present. I presented. Ted presented. This is a theater owner in Rouge, and I think this gentleman was another theater owner. I'm not sure, but these ladies were faculty members who were in her department. This is an interpreter for one of the ladies who spoke in German because of the work that Aldridge had done in Germany several times. And then we just did a whole 1-day thing. This whole library floor was filled. I had gotten some things from Northwestern because they have an extensive Aldridge collection, which I went to see in 2011. And this is the picture that you see. this was their poster, and you see it's based on the same picture, the painting that's there at the National Gallery in Washington. And let me see. Thank whoever said do that. Push play. The other thing that we did is this one. I am so sorry. Here we go. Okay, push play. All right. This is in 2014. And very short, I got 3 minutes, very short. When I met Christina in 2012, I told her what I had found out, the various places that were named for him, the accolades, etc. And I said, we have to do something with this information. She'd been trying to get the grave restored forever. And the city, she kept pushing them. So I found out that there is a walk of fame in Rouge because they have the film school in all of Poland and for really most of Europe. So think Roman Polanski quality in directors and filmmakers, etc. So I said, why don't we get a thing on the a thing on the ground for Aldridge? Sounded great. So I started contacting these theaters, not the dead ones that I mentioned in the 1880s, but a number of Aldridge theaters that are named for him now, North Carolina, San Diego, etc. And I wrote and I said, I need a letter from you based on the fact that your theater is named for Aldridge. You could have picked any number of names. The man's been dead for over 150 years. So they wrote letters, one sealed and put in an envelope, and then a copy of it, and put that copy in another envelope and sent it to me. So I had to go to Poland, not for that, but for facing history in ourselves, if any of you know that. And I stopped in to see Christina while I was there, and I gave her the envelopes. And we got the call that night, and they said, you can't do that. You can't do it because, number one, he wasn't in film. Well, of course he wasn't in film because he wasn't born then. And I could come up with a couple of names that were on their walk that people weren't even actors, much less they weren't even in film. So I went back home and it was like, and then I get a call in September, that was May. And they said, we think we have it. What do you want to put? What's the name you want to put on this plaque? I said, are you serious? So let me just check one thing here. Hang on. Do you see this? You will in a minute. Do you see the statue? And this red is the top of a car roof or a bus roof. Can you see the statue with this woman up at top?
Yes.
The guy who did this did our plaque. I was blown away. This is a memorial that he did, and he was in his 80s when he did ours, for the Warsaw, not the Warsaw ghetto, but the whole uprising of the city. And I don't know whether that was toward the end when the Russians waited while the Germans went in and did it or not. I don't remember. But this is that. And they have actually moved this to another part of Warsaw. But that's what it was. So hang on. That's who did this. And this is the picture of yours truly.
Hmm.
Wait, did I mess up? Oh, Barbara. Okay, play. This is my picture. They said, what's your name? I went, Barbara. And I thought, my parents did all this, Johnson Williams. And so this is 2014. And then in 2017, we did the other thing. And then just recently, this past November, they were able to refurbish the grave. And that'll be my last picture because it's 620 or 726. Hang on. Exit. All right, I think it's up here. I think it's right. Nope, that's the way it looked. The grave with, fading stuff. And this is written in the British. So this is the seventh day, the eighth month, not the eighth and the seventh, in 1867 when he dies. So I think I could go back just a bit. And this will be the last one if I can find it. And I can't. So hang on.
I remember there was a picture. The people in Wuj didn't know who he was, and so you said they assumed he was an African king.
Yeah, this picture was put up in 1885 when his daughter, the contralto, came through and raised money for the concert. So we had a contract, which we didn't sign before COVID, to have it repaired. It was going to run like $30,000, and you have to do it by historical groups because they're the ones who know how to do this, going that far back. And we said, well, you can forget that. So just this last year, the city actually repairs some of the graves, and they included Aldridge as one of them. And this is the way it looks today. All of this was there before, but this was slate and rock and cracking, and this was peeling gold, so to speak. But the picture has been there since 1885. The daughter put this up, and they didn't even have this up for a while, this part. He's not buried here. He's actually buried back there. So that was November 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th. We went back for that. And that's it, folks, for now.
We have a few minutes. I'm not going to stop the recording until I think 7:35. So if anyone has any questions, Harriet Hobson was able to join us briefly. I see that she's not on the call now, so she is having computer trouble, but she was able to see part of that. So thank you to Harriet for setting this up.
Yeah, the thing with Harriet, she started this group of Philly people when you went wherever you went to school and you kept up. So I think there are 13 of us. I know 3 of the others plus Harriet, but Harriet and 2 others and I started kindergarten together. So when we turn 84, all of us this year, we will have known each other for 80 years. And we're still friends. And I wish kids today would know the difference between being a friend and being friendly. They're 2 totally different things. And they think that because you're friendly, you're a friend. They're not like Harriet and the others. It's not the same.
Barbara, if you want to unshare your screen, I'm going to remove the spotlight on you.
That would be good. I'm tired.
And if anyone wants to ask questions or make a comment, this is the time.
Can you tell me how many theater people there are? I mean, folks, you're not?
Hey,
'Cause
hey, Barbara, thank you so much for that, Miss Williams. You're amazing. I'm a theater person. I work at Oslo Repertory Theater in Sarasota. And this was great to hear about Ira and the work that you've done to keep his legacy. So thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, that's one. Anybody else? Oslo, did you say?
Yes, ma'am, that's right. The Oslo
Okay.
Repertory Theater. Mhm.
Okay.
It's a very prestigious theater here.
We're
Right.
theater people too also.
Oh, good.
We just
What
went
do
to a
you think?
play today,
And
Aslo Theater, and it was a beautiful play, Anna in the Tropics.
Anna in the
Oh,
Tropics.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
those are
heard
my
that was
friends. I just saw y'all earlier
That's
today.
right.
Yes.
We just saw you.
And we're going to New York next week, and we're going to look up the African Grove Theater in Manhattan.
Oh, please do it, but it's not, the standalone thing that it was. It's just in somewhere in some big building that New York University does. But you can find an address. But now I would just call New York University and ask them. And I don't know if I have the
When my son went to NYU, so we'll find it.
Okay. That's
Harriet, do you have
good.
something?
Does
I wanted
anybody-
to say thank you also, Barbara. This was really interesting. And my very good friend's daughter wanted to be in on the Zoom call as well. She was so sorry there was a death in the family and the services this weekend, so it prevented her from joining. But she is a Shakespearean actress. She's in her early 40s and acted for several years in London. And now she's in Washington, D.C. and performing in D.C. For the theater. But she of course knew about Ira Aldridge when I asked her, and she was sorry that she couldn't be here to speak with you and learn more about him.
Thank you. She also knows Joseph Meidel, who I don't know if he's still with the Royal Shakespeare Company or not, but he is an Aldridge expert and was supposed to be in that group picture that you saw, but um, the flight that he had on Ryanair out of, I can't remember the airport that's near Stratford, canceled the flight and he couldn't come. It was awful. But Tony Howard came, and I don't think I mentioned him. And she should probably know Tony Howard, maybe not, but I think she may know his work. Thank you.
I
Thank
don't
you.
want to speak up for Lucille, but didn't you say you were an Aldridge player, Lucille?
You're muted, Lucille.
Yeah.
You're muted.
Yes, I was. When I was at Morgan State, I was in the Ira Aldridge Players. That was what we called ourselves. We were in the IAP.
And
Say.
tell me if this isn't true, that some of the actors, some of the people, some of the students, not the adults, but some of the students in the IAP almost wanted to see IAP behind their name at graduation rather than the Bachelors of Science. I just thought that was terrific.
Yeah,
Yeah, I did. I was in Baltimore last month, and I had lunch with a friend from Morgan State, and they are still the Ira Aldridge Players. They are still
Yes,
there.
they are. They are. And let me tell you, I knew Sandra Dunlap Bassfield.
Oh, yeah, she was a good friend. That was Shirley Bassfield. Shirley Dunn Bassfield. Yeah, I was very sorry. She passed away a few years ago. Matter of fact, we were in the Ira Aldridge Players together. And she did great things at I think she was at the University of Cincinnati for a while and a couple of places. Yeah.
And she's the one who told Ted Lange about yeah, she was the one who told him. And she met us in Baltimore in 2017. She took us to the Walters Museum because she was working with them on Red Velvet, which was the first theater play to come out on Aldridge 10 years ago now, 2004. Well, yeah, 2014. And she also, what else did she do for me? She did something else for me. And we were on campus 2 years ago and met Jan Short. And
I didn't know Jan Short did.
Jan Short took over for Shirley.
Oh, did she? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I wasn't.
And she's still there. But
Lucille?
I love Shirley.
I did. She was a dear friend.
So much.
Lucille,
Yes.
what kind of shows or plays did the Ira Aldridge Players produce? Or
We did at the time. We did Leroy. Well, Imamu Baraka, Leroy Jones at the time, and we did a lot of things like the new wine in a new bowl. Kind of creative things. Mimicking some of the theater from the 30s and 40s. We would have shows like that, and I'm trying to think. I can't even. It was so long ago. I'm trying to think of, but I know we did. The Dutchman. I remember that one.
Yeah.
I was in that one, and we did. Sometimes we did things with Towson's theater because I was also in that theater. I actually graduated from Towson.
Wow.
And we did Raisin in the Sun. So we did some classical things and we did some creative things.
I'm going to turn the recording off now, but you're welcome to stay and enjoy the conversation.